Outgrowing a person. What does that truly mean? It's something that every one of us has experienced and kind of normalized this notion. It's just a stated fact that some people you may call friend one day may not stay that way forever. Nothing in life just stays the same forever. But why is that? And the theme of human relationships, hardships you may face in your life, emotional burdens that may be thrown your way, or lack thereof, can all attest to why you may feel like you've outgrown a person. Nights in the Woods is a fantastic game that tackles this very notion and does so quite masterfully and tastefully. You play as May Borowski, a 20-year dropout who recently moved back to her small town, Possum Springs. Since she just came back home after 2 long years of university, she has some catching up to do with her friends and the town itself. Things become apparent that whatever happened to May at school has stunted and stagnated her mental growth. All her friends have now moved forward in their lives, getting themselves jobs, fighting their own battles, and coming to grips with their own reality. A heavy subplot of this game is Possum Springs itself, as it serves as a physical reminder of how things can rapidly change. Jobs are becoming scarce, people are being laid off, Possum Springs is falling apart quite literally, and the once booming companies and stores are closing down due to economic collapse. All the while we piece together what exactly happened to May before she left and while she was gone. But in order to do that, we need to go back to the beginning. Back to 1996. The moment May Borowski was left behind. In 1996, May Borowski was brought into this world by Candy and Stan Borowski. Their parents owned a booming mining company for generations in the town of Possum Springs. But the small town of Possum Springs has not been kind to its residents regarding jobs as of late. Even still, the parents managed to save up enough funds to give May the option of going to college if she so pleased, and she would be the first in her family to do so. During the early years of May's childhood, I'm guessing around the year 2000 to the early 2000s, May is shown to be very close to her grandfather, as he would oftentimes tell her bedtime stories before bed. One such story would be a supplementary release back in 2014 by the name of Lost Constellations, which features a standalone tale separate from the Nights in the Woods narrative, but still sharing the same universe. But for this video, we want to fully explore Possum Springs, so we'll come back to this game at a later date. Throughout high school, May would come to curate her own circle of friends. She'd meet Greg, a very happy and excited individual who always is down to clown and loves to get into mischiefs and go around doing quote-unquote crimes, which usually ranges from just exploring abandoned buildings and destroying stuff. Angus, on the other hand, who's Greg's boyfriend, he's a tall but quiet soul. He's also a techno nerd, and in Greg's eyes, he's totally a hacker. And finally B, May's best friend, until they weren't. All throughout their childhood, they were so close to the point that they had nicknames for each other, which was Mayday and BB. Their accounts of their friendship may differ, as May believes that when they were about 12, they got into this huge fight, while B recalls May ignoring her calls and hanging out all of a sudden with Greg. And so she just thought she was just too cool for her. Soon, May would go off to college, leaving the small town of Possum Springs behind, or at least she was supposed to. After 2 long years away from home, May would make her way back to Possum Springs, and her reasoning being, quote-unquote, it just didn't work out. Which finally brings us to the start of the game. May's train ride home, only to realize that no one is there to see her. This game does an amazing job at displaying the complex feelings of somberful nostalgia. If my viewers are anywhere near my age, or at least close to it, I remember clearly for the first moment of my life when I had gone off to college and came back for winter break. Funny enough, it was actually a very similar situation as May, where her parents mixed up the dates and no one was there to see her after I had been gone for so long. I remember the nip in the air as I would exhale and make mist clouds. My hands were frozen numb, but that was a feeling I had long forgotten due to Georgia never really getting that code, and most importantly, the sound. It was familiar, like it sounded like a city, so it wasn't very unique, but familiar all the same. I ended up having to take the metro train home, and to pass my time, I would love to people watch. And when I saw high school kids get on in major groups as they just bantered and act as kids should, it hadn't been that long since I was in their shoes, but even still, I found myself smirking. Yet, I could feel a chill run through my arms. I was sad, as the reality that I could never really go back hit me. Within Nights in the Woods, May's walk back home is a trip down memory lane. As she exits the train station, she pays no mind to the economic propaganda that is displaying on TV, and instead recalls a half-finished construction set that she used to use all the time and play on when she was a kid, showing her unconscious ignorance and her stubbornness to return to the way things used to be. But that's just not the way the world works. Time and time again, May is reminded about either her troubled past or her friends changing as well. Having random children calling her killer for the incident that happened sometime in high school, or when May's favorite shop, Possibilities, closes down, or even when May is reminded that the group doesn't perform live because they're all got actual work that needs to be done. Also, I totally forgot to mention this, but yeah, the group of 4 are actually a band, and they actually enjoy practicing every now and again as they feel they're just having fun. This theme has always hit me extra hard. For me personally, I feel like there has been times where I'll be walking through a mall or some form of shopping district and just realizing that everyone is doing their own thing. Then I thought off into something more of like, well, are they enjoying their time working here, or are they just doing it to make ends meet? Is this the only way? Then I begin wondering, well, if they could do something they enjoy, and if they could make money from it all the same, what are they gonna do if they can't have both? I only found that answer after watching this 2012 anime by the name of Kids of the Slope. It's actually a slice of life drama romance anime that follows a group of kids who are passionate about jazz. Of course, there are love triangles. I think the tall guy likes his best friend, and the girl likes the gay guy, and the main character likes the girl, so on and so forth. The story itself is beautiful, but what I believe is the most beautiful thing about it is the ending, and the ending is so memorable. The girl, finally realizing she had feelings for the main character, goes to run after him as he boards the train to go off to medical school or something. I had fully expected her to stop him. She missed him and never got to truly tell him how she really felt. Years would pass. Years later, down the road, it's shown that the group of friends have not seen each other in a long time. The main character dude is now a doctor. The gay guy drummer is now a pastor, and the girl, she's become a teacher. When the 3 of them would all meet again, you know what they did? The same thing they would always do. What they loved to do. They played jazz. After I concluded that anime, I think I was about maybe 14 or maybe 13, and it was a new perspective I never gave much thought on. But that day, as I cried, I just felt I needed to take a walk. I cried, and I walked, and I thought about how beautiful it all was. Humans shouldn't be money hungry when it comes to their passions, but that should be the only constant in our ever-changing lives. Which we see in the case with May and her friends. They suck. But even still, they simply enjoy what they do, and that has become the only constant in this slow declining town known as Possum Springs. Another thing I found to be such an awesome detail is that May canonically sucks at bass. Like, I'm not saying this to be mean, even if you play the bass parts perfectly, it still sounds off, like she's not good, like she herself is no good, and even still the group still invites her to play every single time. The somberful nostalgia is what I'm calling it, by the way, moving forward, doesn't end there. How the game is played forces the player to have to interact with the world around them. Within the game, May is kind of a mess. She is literally a baby, and all of her friends have jobs and are usually doing various things on different days, and you as a player can choose who you want to hang out with to fill that day. You can either go with your ex-best friend B or the current bestie Greg. Either way, your parents' home is on the other side of town. So in putting you there, The game forces May to see what's changed, to witness the upbeat moments of Possum Springs and the most times sadder moments coming from the adults. From missing posters for a close high school friend, to adults worrying about the economics and how to bring the markets to the future of Possum Springs, to saddened adults finding it more and more difficult to find jobs anywhere. It's a sad reality, and one May was not or did not want to be familiar with when she was younger. At a certain point in the game, each day it's up to May to choose who you want to hang out with. Rather that be Greg or B. Whoever you choose, you learn more about their struggles and do different activities. With B, we learn on a deeper level as to why she seems to be so angry or even disappointed with us. It's partly to do with jealousy, yes, but it's also pent-up stress and anger due to her father and work. The father is getting older and isn't doing much work at the shop, but even still, he gets a huge cut due to being the owner, practically using his daughter as, well, quote-unquote free labor. May and B would get into an argument about this situation, showing their views on life and how different their maturity level truly is. May, as naive as she is, worries for her friend, and tells her she needs to say something and that she can't roll over and take it. While B doesn't think there's anything left to do. It's either leave her aging father to die alone and deal with the stress all alone, or she can take up that stress and somehow create some type of living out of it. This becomes even more apparent when after the party that May and B go to, B ends up running away to isolate, and during this conversation we truly understand how she feels. When her mother's life ended, so did hers. Her father had a breakdown, all the bills came flying to her, and things got so bad to the point where the house she grew up in was lost in the carnage. Everything she has ever owned, her dreams, her house, her dad, her mom, her life, it's all gone. She truly feels trapped, and seeing May come back to Possum Springs without a care in the world makes her kinda hate May. B and May's relationship has become weird. Despite being the same age, it's like dealing with night and day. You can tell B really just wants to have fun and be a kid again, be happy again. It's evident with her time spent with May at the mall and when she tags along with her at her work, but Possum Springs has sucked the life and joy right out of her. With Gregory, things are a lot less tense. When hanging out with Greg, we do quote-unquote crimes, which just consist of breaking in and breaking shit and just being two little shitheads. I'm gonna be honest. Two things that are talked about during our activities together is the situation about Casey, the friend that skipped town and disappeared one day, as he used to do crimes with May and Greg back in the day, and Greg's self-doubt. That's the second thing. It's never really said explicitly, but said in either text or in person. Greg lets May know that sometimes his moods will just go up and go down for no good reason. He seems to be putting in a lot of effort into becoming the best him possible, because in his eyes, he's just a pile of trash. He thinks if he doesn't become someone worthy of Angus, he might lose him. Angus hadn't had the best life, and in Greg's words, he really just needs a Greg in his life right now. And with this thought process, every time he has any mood swings, he doesn't feel entitled enough to be having these types of feelings or insecurities. He believes he has no future, and with no future in mind, he struggles to see how things could work out. But as soon as May reassures him a bit, just like clockwork, he's back to his old goofy self, making you wonder, which is the real him? Is he only acting okay in front of others and Angus, or behind closed doors is he sad and miserable as everyone else is? Or is it a mixture of both? They never say it, but Greg for sure has some form of bipolar disorder, and maybe even struggles with anxiety as he fears the future and its unknown aspects. And yet, even still, this only shows how left behind May truly is, not only mentally, but relationship-wise. In terms of short-term goals or financially, on day 6 or so, May would get up as she normally does, do a good stretch, put her shoes on, and head downstairs to say hello to her mother. only to find that the mother's patience has run dry. Candy asks her to open up about school and why she decided to just up and leave it all behind. And when May does her usual routine of not answering the question, she lets her have it, saying how day in and day out she's done nothing but act as if nothing has changed. But this was something the parents have sacrificed so much for. Over 18 years, they sacrificed it. And let's own a detail that soon they'll be losing the very house she takes for granted. This of course gets her attention, but the mother brings this to another example of May being in her own little world and only begins to really care when it affects her. And this is quite true from as far as I could see. May has been in her little bubble, trying to act as if everything is the same as she left it 2 years ago, but that just isn't the case. The townfolk have now started spreading rumors about May, calling her killer. Possum Springs is decaying before her very eyes as constructions, sinkholes, and floods are common now. Markets have become abandoned, and generational companies like the mine are simply done for. Her friends have all moved on with their life. Greg has begun to mellow out and started really working on himself and focusing on himself and Angus's future. That is until May got back. Cassie is gone and no one knows where and why and can really only speculate. Angus is wanting to move far away from his family because of his abusive past, dealing with his father's physical abuse and his mother's emotional, psychological, and neglectful abuse. B developing acute depression as she deals with the loss of her mother, her home, her father, her new way of life, ultimately just feeling doomed. But it doesn't just stop at the friends. Everyone's moving on. May's father is getting paid much less and is now working at a deli supermarket. The mother is, well, working at the church, but also is having this feeling of disappointment towards her daughter as she's trying to live vicariously through her. The old teacher from high school is now working as a greeter at the same supermarket. Selmers, a neighbor of May, is a former painkiller addict who did jail time and is now in rehab. And some random cat dude is more stressed than a middle-aged adult and he's barely brushed his 20s. The list honestly goes on and on. Hello, welcome back to another video. It is Yuri Plays, Yuri Senpai, Yuri Clark, whatever you know me by, that's who I am. And guess what? This is a reminder. Hit the subscription bell, hit the subscribe bell. I don't know how to do this very often, but this is just a little reminder. If you like what you see here, if you like what I'm doing here, hit the bell, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. I'm gonna get better at this. And also, if you are interested in watching my live streams without ads, you can consider subscribing to my membership for $1 a month. I believe it is something like that, and I'll have all of my future streams archived, including Nights in the Woods, Hollow Knight, and the rest of it. So I'll see you back to the video. A two-way street. But I think it's unfair to paint May in such a negative light because it's definitely a two-way street. Just as someone can outgrow a person also means a person can feel they've grown too much and think a bit too highly of themselves and leave everyone behind as they deal with their own problems. I know we've all experienced this before when we had a close friend, someone we hung out on a daily basis with, then poof, one day they're just gone. Every time you try to invite them to a hangout, they decline. Every time you call them, they ignore your call. Every time you fly them a text, it takes days for a reply, only to find out that they either found themselves a boyfriend or a girlfriend, partner, decided to hang out with another group of people, and just cast you aside. I think May is in a similar situation. Everyone sits there and judges her for her actions and the way she acts, but no one truly understands her motives and don't really try to understand past asking her about it. But with anyone battling some form of depression or anxiety or some underlying mental illness, it's sometimes just impossible to describe the way you're feeling because you yourself aren't even really sure how to express what you're feeling. I think May says it best during her conversation with B after the party. B had asked her why'd she drop out of school so suddenly, and May said this: I don't know. My head is in pieces right now. Any answer I could give you would sound nuts. Throughout the game, it's apparent that May has had issues from a very young age. It was only worsened by Dr. Hate's instructions to write how she's feeling and to repress her anger issues. No medication, no nothing, just a mentally healthy thing to do was to pretend that it doesn't exist. Obviously, I'm being very satire. And Dr. Hank has done this to so many people, including the aforementioned Selmer, who had an opioid addiction, and dude gave her the notebook method. I digress. Sometime in high school, May would suffer her first episode of what we now know is called derealization, an episode where the person dissociates from reality for a moment in time. May would recall how she felt like everything in the universe just wasn't real, how everything was just quote-unquote shapes. Just felt a great sadness at this very moment. She felt truly alone. The next day at a softball game, May would have her second episode. She said something just broke inside of her, and when she came to, she was holding a bloody bat, and a kid named Andy was on the floor bleeding from his head. This incident spread like wildfire throughout the community, and many of the parents told their kids to stay away from May, and she got that nickname Killer. Simultaneously, May's parents fell on hard times as they spent lots and lots of money paying for Andy's medical bills and trying to get May the help that she truly needed, only to bring her to Dr. Hank, who simply did not help her in the slightest. So when she was sent off to school, her problems never truly went away. It only intensified. When in college, the shapes didn't go away. In fact, there was a giant rustic statue pointing straight to her room 24 hours, 7 days a week. Each day, it was just an ominous collage of shapes, reminding her of what she did and how she felt during her episodes, and it terrified her. She couldn't sleep at all, and she was forced to take cough syrup just to do so, only to then be faced with terrible nightmares. May was terrified to leave her room and would even starve herself for days on end, and when she finally got the courage to leave, she downed an entire pizza in one go. Needless to say, she couldn't focus on her well-being, let alone class, and one day, she finally got the courage to drop out of college and come back to the safety of her town where there wasn't quote-unquote weird shapes. Everyone is suffering, but no one is truly trying hard enough to understand what is happening with May at school. Granted, they did ask. They did ask multiple times, but emotions are as complex as they can get, and sometimes you need a bit more time to truly unpack it all. There's a reason why those who go through traumatic experiences when they are young, or even when they're older, sometimes takes years to fully understand and grasp the gravity of the situation, let alone talk about it. Harfest and Ghost? Can you believe that up to this point, I've spent this entire video thus far just discussing May Borowski's relationship with then Possum Springs, which is really only about 5 hours of the game. When I tell you this game is jam-packed with details, that's honestly an understatement. I'm sure I've missed on a bunch of details. I'm sure you guys are going to flood the comments and tell me all about it. Harfest serves as a second half of the game, when things get a little bit more spooky as they bring the former subplot into the main ground. Up to this point, we've only seen glimpses of something weird happening in Possum Springs. Firstly, our friend Casey missing, and no one in Possum Springs seems to be actively doing anything to find him. And secondly, the fucking arm just chilling on the sidewalk, never revisited, never talked about again. And finally, the kidnapping that May saw at the end of the Heart Festival. When May would go to chase the figure, he somehow managed to get through a barbed wire fence with a chain lock around it. So it could only be one explanation for what's happening here. Ghost. Obviously, it's not a ghost, but May seems to seriously think so and forces all her friends to accompany her as she figures out this ghost mystery. she would come to find lots of information about the miners' strike and the mine explosion that killed 122 people. That's too boring though, so she would either go to a graveyard, a haunted house, or a Possum Spring. Either way, she'd encounter the same hooded figure, which only intensified her nightmares. Up until this point, May would go off to bed and she would have nightmares every single night that only increasingly got worse every single time she went to sleep. And it would always end the same way. She'd run around, collect these musicians, and once finding all 5 of them, I believe, a giant astral beast comes and seemingly destroys the world as May cowers in fear. The night of the kidnapping, May would have her final and worst nightmare. This time she would meet God himself, or at least what she thought God was. But the entity itself didn't think of itself as God. The entity known as the Sky Cat tells May that there is a hole in the center of everything that always forgets and becomes forgotten. Then tells May to stop space hopping and closes the space door thing. I don't know. All I know is that May didn't have any more of those dreams after that, so maybe it was supernatural. I'll get more into my theories regarding the whole aspect towards the end of the video, but as of right now, May goes to each of these locations and something spooky happens until she gets the great idea to venture into the mines and really get to the bottom of this. Her friends, not believing in ghosts, still believe in her, and so they accompany May only to find cultists. Yes, there were no ghosts, but a secret society in the shadows of Possum Springs. While I played the game, I had loosely understood that this game to have some form of a wacky plot twist, but 6 hours into the game I felt like it was perfect. The storytelling, the characters, the art design, the vibes. So when the plot of the ghost made its way into the narrative, I kinda scoffed, I'm not gonna lie. It felt out of place, or it just seemed a bit obvious that it wasn't a ghost all along. Yet the story itself was bringing a lot of attention to this story beat. I felt it was forced, that it didn't really fit into the theme of the story until it did. The cultist group serves as a stark reminder of the story and May of the dangers of not being able to change or grow, being stagnant, being stuck in one type of situation. The cultist group has been working in the shadows for a long time now. They solely believe in this thing called the Black Goat, and that the Black Goat can bring prosperity to the town of Possum Springs, but obviously this doesn't seem to be working. It is still a very much dying town. When May and the gang encounter the group, they tell them the history of this belief. Apparently, when the coal mines minerals were exhausted and people began leaving for work elsewhere, Possum Springs fell on hard times. It was only when a dude named Ed and this other dude was sent down into the mines to find if there was any coal left. Instead, the dude would find a bottomless pit and fall down into it. When Ed screamed out his name, he only heard the song of the Black Goat in return. The Black Goat told Ed if he were to bring sacrifices, it promises to bring prosperity to Possum Springs. With this, everything makes sense now. The arm in the middle of the street was from one of the sacrifices. The kidnapping May saw, the cryptic warnings coming from her aunt to stay safe, Casey's disappearance. Casey didn't skip town, but instead was kidnapped and fed to the Black Goat, and everyone faked like it didn't happen. Within Nights in the Woods, the talk of gods is actually a very big portion of the game. May has trouble believing in God. May's mother works at the church. The pastor woman doesn't know if God exists or not, but chooses to believe in faith, and that's where faith comes in and all that. Angus, due to his past beliefs, doesn't believe God exists, but people create entities to better cope with their situations, and B has started to not believe in God because of recent events of her losing her life and losing her mother. And I think this is purposeful. Night in the Woods wanted to keep our minds on the subject as it ties heavily into the cultists and their beliefs. Backtracking a bit, there was a point in the game where May forces all her friends to go, check out these ghost sightings in order to figure out what the kidnapping was that she witnessed. And on one such outing with Angus to Possum Jump, I believe, Angus would tell her his life story, that he was an unwanted child, that he faced a lot of abuse from his mother and father. But he would leave May with a quote that I think perfectly explains what the cultists are. I believe in a universe that doesn't care, but people do. The black goat doesn't exist. The people of Possum Springs were so confused on how to move on in life that they ended up creating an entity for those to cling to and believe in. Their inability to change made them create an entity that allowed them to never have to change. But in doing so, they made Possum Springs into a zombie or some form of a ghost, sucking the life out of the young residents of Possum Springs and hosting festivals and traditions year by year with the same people, only getting older and older. That is in reference to the game when talking to a cat dude, he tells May his resume is a zombie resume because it's been long dead, yet it's going all over the place. And I thought that was a nice reference to how the town of Possum Springs, where it's been long dead, but it's still hosting festivals like nothing's ever changed. Gods and connections to May. Now, I know what I literally just said, that the point of God and entities within the story was really meant to show how having the inability to change can lead to stunted growth. But I can't help myself. I need to theorize. I need to yap about this because the connections run deep, and I'm sure within the story of Night in the Woods, the creators had some point of reference with what the gods were supposed to mean. For example, within the story, as I said, there was a dream sequence that May has throughout the game, showcasing different cosmic entities and also past events. In this thing called Batter Up, you're beating a rusty statue made of metal that's pointing at you. The spot where you fall, or where May lands, every time it breaks is actually still pointing at May, which displays firsthand the reason why May left in the first place. She felt the founder of the college was pointing at her and becoming weird shapes. And another dream called Astral Alley, and the whole saga, Astral Cold Town, Astral Train, and Astral Fish, it depicts the town's history. Astral Fish depicts especially the Great Flood of 1988. Astral Coal Town represents Possum Springs. Astral Train represents when the coal mine was exhausted and people of the town up and left. So on and so forth. The last dream, the one where you meet God or the cat sky or sky cat, whatever you want to call it, I think shows the future. There is nothing left, only emptiness and sorrow, and this entity represents how the universe is uncaring. Now, throughout the game, you can meet 3 gods. The forest god, which we can see in a different form in Lost Constellations, as well as it makes its appearance different as well. The sky cat, which we just talked about, and the black goat, the main antagonist and the one largely responsible for the entire narrative of the game. The reason I say this is, one, because the black goat is responsible for giving the elder residents of Possum Springs hope and caused many innocent lives to be taken, but also has been in constant contact with May. Which is another reason why, even though Casey, Greg, and May were all delinquents in their younger years, the cultists only went after Casey because Greg began becoming an upstanding member of Possum Springs and May had close connections to the goat itself. The reason I bring this up is because another thing that they said about the cultists is that the cultists look at the people in Possum Springs who would most likely not be missed, and they use them as sacrifices. And so Greg barely grazed the bullet because he started getting a job because of Angus, and May dodged a bullet because she was forced to go off to college and try to make a name for herself, and also that the black goat had close ties to May for whatever reason. It's also speculated, and I believe, that the moment May broke was something to do with the black goat, as when she finally got to speak to the black goat within the game, it's revealed, one, the black goat doesn't speak English, something we'll dive deeper into later on, and when she spoke to the black goat, her friend said she went into this sleepwalky trance, making me believe something similar may have happened when she went into that episode where she started to see shapes. Another interesting thing about the three gods, more specifically the cat god and the goat, is how their cryptic messages are polar opposites from each other. The sky cat, when speaking to May, would say she would find the hole at the center of everything, and the black goat would be described to be the hole at the end of everything, making me believe there is some form of correlation between the two. The creators have said in the past that different gods they use in the games use strong inspirations from Lovecraftian creatures. For example, Shub-Niggurath, the black goat of the woods with 1,000 young, is oftentimes believed to be the black goat creature from Night in the Woods. Past the naming similarities of the two, I'm just gonna call her Shub, is oftentimes described as the goddess of fertility. Within Lovecraft's work of literature, it's described as a massive collection of goo that spouts out goat legs from its body while also spitting out many versions of itself. Kind of like birthing babies, hint the fertility bit. While not a lot is known about Shub, it's often understood that Shub is a separate entity of the goat, but they largely mean the same thing, acting as some form of cosmic form of all-encompassing darkness. Just how a night in the wood is described at the hole at the end of everything, a never-ending hole of darkness. Another bit that I believe helps us understand the correlation of Night in the Woods Black Goat and Lovecraft's Black Goat is that when speaking to May, it speaks gibberish, or at least what she believes to be gibberish. But it's also very common for these things called outer gods to not know the language of English, which brings me to my next point. If the black goat follows the lore of Lovecraft's Shub-Niggurath, then it's not a far-fetched to say that the sky cat is Nyarlathotep. Do not come at me about these damn names. Nyarlathotep is a weird fiction short story by H.P. Lovecraft. It was written in 1920 and first saw publication in the first year's November issue of the United Amateur. The poem itself is a bleak view of human civilization and decline, and it explores the mixed sensations of desperation and defiance in a dying society. Sound familiar? Nyarlathotep also used to win past followers and has the most humanoid figure, and since we are in a world of Night in the Woods, this humanoid figure could be of what the species deemed normal, which is a cat. Not to mention, Nyarlathotep is also known to take many different forms within his stories, and if an outer god has a way to speak English, it'd be him. He also counts Myagos as his followers, similar to how Shug does. The Myagos would be the flea monsters that the sky cat shows May within her dream, and Nyarlathotep would also be the only one who would want May to cut out the traveling and space stuff in her dream, since that's kind of their whole thing. What happens now? While personally I feel like having what happened to May being the result of something supernatural takes away from the story a bit, I feel like there is a lot of fun evidence showing the possibilities of it being so. Though, if it were true, it regressed what makes May so flawed in the first place. Within stories like these, the way the development of the character usually works is there is a character who is at face value garbage, a jerk, a waste in civil society. But through the duration of the narrative, they are meant to see the error of their ways, to grow as people, and by the end of it serve as a representation to the viewers of how to be the best you possible, or becoming relatable to the viewers in a similar time in their life. But in the end of Night in the Woods, May still kinda sucks, actually. Everyone does. And when I say suck, I don't mean their personality or them as people, I mean the situation they're in. By the end of Nights in the Woods, after the cultists have been defeated and the truth about Casey has come out, the group of friends sit and plan their next move. Greg and Angus still plan on leaving Possum Springs and trying to make a life for themselves elsewhere, but with Greg opening up to us about his doubts and insecurities and his fears of things not working out, it leaves a bittersweet taste in our mouth. Will they make it? Will they be happy? Will a falling out transpire? How will Greg take it? How will Angus take it? B by the end of the game is still very much in the same predicament, as we find her in the entirety of the game. She's trapped with constantly being exhausted, taking care of work, her father, and her own grief, or she could simply just up and abandon her father in pursuit of her own happiness, which is just out of the question. And May herself still very much has a long road ahead of her to learn to provide for herself while also battling various mental disorders. She still has no future. Her parents are still going to lose the home because of that second mortgage they took out of the home to put her into college, and now she has to deal with the trauma of current events moving forward. Night in the Woods ends on a very bleak note. Nothing is certain, and the only thing that is true is that time will tell. So every time we get to the end of these things, I always yap about the story, what it meant to me, how it could affect what you should take away from it. Personally, when I got into Night in the Woods, I had no idea what it could be about. Actually, someone had recommended me play this game months ago, and when I looked it up, the cutesy art style kind of made me, turn my head because I was more so fixated on playing games that had a darker narrative, that were really tackling things like lobotomizing, depression, murder, broken psyches, just like a variety of different emotions that I personally find the greatest joy in. So when I played the game and in Night in the Woods, and it really tackled such heavy topics so nonchalantly, where it wasn't out in your face, it was something relatable. Because obviously it's very fun to learn about lobotomizing, or it's very fun to learn about the history of lobotomy and have a representation of that. It's cool to see like a story tackle survivor's guilt and how that could, really affect a person in like a cool setting. Obviously, it's cool to dive into a game where you're living your cognitive therapy. It's cool to see a game of different magnitudes, right? But I think what sets Night in the Woods apart from all these other games is that it's relatable. It's, we're not all of us are taking cognitive therapy and seeing monsters manifest straight from the ground, like in Afraid of Monsters and Cry of Fear. Not all of us are robots battling with an existential crisis, and like in Near Optima. Not all of us are taking drugs to be prepped for being lobotomized. Not all of us are dealing with survivor's guilt, but a lot of us are dealing with underlying mental disorders. A lot of us are having problems with knowing what the future holds. A lot of us are having problems with growing as people. Night in the Woods is always a game about growth and what it means to grow. It's a personal journey. When I grew up, and I guess this has been a recent development, but I've always been in school from like the earliest time of my life, from kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade, to then graduating to go to college. For 21 years of my life, I felt like I was always learning. I always had something to do the next day. I always had something that I was having to do. It was mandatory at a certain point. School, it's a no-brainer. I'm going to get up to school, go to school all day, come home, rinse and repeat, and then the weekends have fun. But I will always have something to do. It was only when I graduated college, when someone had asked, they were like, hey, what are you going to do for this summer break? And I was like, summer break? It's not a summer break anymore. I don't have anything to come back to.
It's just summer. And so it kind of put the ball in my court, right? It kind of made me feel like in that moment I realized that I truly don't have anything to do. What is it that I'm striving for? What is it that I want to do with my days? And for the first couple of days, I kind of just sat and did nothing. I was bored out of my mind. I was confused. I had nothing to really do until I got off my ass and decided that I'm gonna make something of my life. And I think that's what Night in the Woods truly is that change is impossible if you're not moving forwards or backwards, whatever kind of change you're looking for. People don't usually want to regress, but you can't change if you're standing still. You need to move forward. And Night in the Woods does that in a very good way. There's been a lot of things. I've been watching like other I guess analysis, and that one big thing that I took away from one person's analysis is that, at least in America or in filmmaking in America, people tend to enjoy seeing a character go from left to right, is because that's how we read. Everything we read is left to right, so it's kind of taken as progression. But if you notice, the way that May walks, that hang out with all her friends, she's regressing. She's trying to go back to her childhood because she's always going left. She's always going left. And every time she goes right, she goes back home to her parents, and her parents bring up, hey, do you want to talk about school? You know, they're going to be like, hey, do you want to talk about school? Hey, honey, you're looking tired. Hey, honey, are you okay? And of course, when she goes back home, she also struggles with going to sleep, having these nightmares that bring up the past. And then back at it again, she goes right to the left. The right is always blocked. And I didn't even peep that, and I thought that was a beautiful story. And I think that's one thing that Night in the Woods does very well. It implicitly tells you these things. It doesn't just outright tell you that May has derealization. It doesn't just tell you that she has depression, that she has anxiety, that she has all these things. It doesn't go to Greg and say Greg has bipolar disorder. It doesn't go to Angus and say that he's dealing with PTSD. But it's shown. It is shown. And I absolutely love this game. I think one big thing that I can take away from Night in the Woods, and if anyone needs to hear this, please listen up. The past does not define you. If there was one big thing about May, was that from a child, and this was when she was arguing with her mom, the parents sacrificed a lot to save up a lot of money to take out a mortgage to get her to school, and it was always a family plan from when she was like 6. And when she tells her this, you know, May gets up. It was like, yeah, I've only been hearing about me going to, like, being the first to go to college since I was like 6, right? And I feel like a lot of people can relate to that saying, how sometimes parents would like to live vicariously through you, whether that be when you're playing sports, whether that being you're an artist or an aspiring artist, or just going to college. And sometimes when you grow up, you become your own person and you tend to want to do your own things. Honestly, a very, very off the script thing that I'm gonna just bring up because I loved the movie was Iron Claw. If you don't know Iron Claw, it follows a family of wrestlers, right? And they had this curse, right? This curse around their family, and all the 5 brothers, I think 4 of the 5 brothers, I should say, all had committed self-harm, and they're no longer with us. But I watched Iron Claw, the movie, the other day, and I think that it serves as a very, very deep narrative about forcing people to live vicariously through them. It can only lead to mental, like, troubles. It's hard for me to really say it in profound words off the script, but Iron Claw really just showed me that, like, when you force this narrative, when you force this agenda on someone, it's going to have negative effects, whether they are depressed, whether they're angry, whether they turn to drugs and alcohol, whether they try to delude themselves that this is truly what they want, or if they have daddy issues like an Iron Claw and they truly just want any type of love and affection that they could get. That's what's going to happen. And we see that with May. May didn't work out. And I feel like for people back at home that may be watching this right now, it didn't work out for you either. Maybe you went to school and maybe it wasn't what you wanted to do. Maybe you felt a little guilty because you wanted to change majors and you knew that would just be more money. Maybe you were playing sports and one day you just came home from a long grueling practice and realized, why am I doing this? Maybe you're in school right now, in high school, and you're thinking about the future and how it may not be where you want to go. But for so long now, your parents have been coercing you, have been proud of you, have been cheering your name because you're about to go off to be a big boy, a big college boy. It doesn't have to be that way. I know it may seem that way, but it does not have to be that way. I'm going to open up to you guys. For a long time now, my mother has been an artist. She went to this school called Duke Ellington School of the Arts, and she was a very talented artist. And when I grew up and she grew out of drawing and was working at some corporate job, she saw me pick up a pencil and thought, that's nice. And when I really got into it, it was because I thought my mom would absolutely love if I drew with her. And in a way, it did. So I went from drawing, and then I went to Duke Ellington, the same high school that she went to when she was at my age. And I went through school the entire time. But guess what? I wasn't good enough to draw. I was not talented enough to get into the drawing system. And I remember crying in the shower when they rejected it, and I had to go somewhere else. So I went to technical design and production. And while I was into design, technical design and productions, it's called TDP, so that's what I'm just going to call it. From that time, I continued drawing. I didn't want to give up. I was drawing in my sketchbooks time and time again, and a lot to my teacher's annoyances. I would be drawing in class. Sometimes I would be backstage while the performance is happening, and I would have my sketchbook. I didn't have to do anything for 30 minutes. I thought I could draw. And it was one day when my teacher said this. My teacher said, "You're not talented in drawing, so why not work on something you are talented in?" And that hurt. That definitely hurt, because I felt like my whole identity was drawing. My entire purpose was drawing. At that point, I didn't see another way of becoming a successful adult. I didn't see myself working at some job for the rest of my life, being sad and not drawing, right? And to the point where it was almost out of spite. I kept drawing. I kept getting better. And obviously, if you do things time and time and time again, you're going to get better with time. And by the end of senior year, I was a lot better than a lot of the seniors in my grade who were in visual arts. That's what it's called. And so with that skill, I went to SCAD. SCAD is a art school, very expensive one at that. And when I got there, I enjoyed my time. I enjoyed drawing. I enjoyed everything that I was doing. But the more I got in there, the more I'm glad that they were so transparent, because they were like, if you are not here for the passion of drawing, then you should not be here, because money will not be involved. And to a point, they're kind of correct. Yes, you don't get a lot of money through it unless you're doing it overworking, you know? That's why a lot of mangaka tend to pass away a lot earlier, because it's a lot of stress. It's not kind at all. And so by the time I was a senior, I didn't have any way to tell my parents this, and I still don't. It's still an ongoing battle. But I fell out of love with drawing. I didn't like drawing anymore. I like drawing as a passion, but not as a career choice. And that's when I truly dived into something that I did enjoy. Content creation, what I'm doing right now. And after a long year of working odd jobs and getting a fan base that actually does enjoy my stuff and getting my own spot, even if it's not what I directly thought I'd be doing at this time in my life, I'm here. So this entire story was for me to finally leave you guys with this ending message. If you guys feel like you are forced down a path, no, you aren't. No, you're not. It won't immediately fix, right? I'm not telling you to just drop out of school if you have no immediate thing. Please plan ahead. Plan what you're going to do. If you're going to leave, be mentally prepared to be working for the rest of your life, but make sure that job that you get is just temporary and you do something that you truly love to do. Okay? Night in the Woods is just about that. B was selfless, and now she's depressed, sad, and exhausted. Angus was selfless, and now he wants to move away as far as possible without realizing that he's dragging Greg away from his friends. And obviously Greg loves Angus and decides to become the best him possible, working jobs that he obviously doesn't care about, but he thinks this is the best way to move forward with Angus. So I'm saying this all to say, choose you at the end of the day. Choose you. Choose you. Because that is really the only way to grow, is when you choose to indulge something that you truly enjoy. Because when you truly enjoy this very thing, you're going to get better at it. Someone out there is going to appreciate it. Someone out there is going to be looking for it. Someone out there is going to love that you do this unconditionally. And so I say this all to say, choose you. Okay? Choose you. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.